Hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming out to the library on a gorgeous fall day to celebrate printmaking in all forms. We are delighted to bring this event to the library and to have folks coming out eagerly, attending all the talks, getting hands-on, getting ink on their hands downstairs, and then shopping and chatting with all of the wonderful printmakers that are in the lobby. This is our third and final presenter talk today. My name is Amanda. I do work here at the library. I want to remind you, for the courtesy of those around you, as well as our speaker, if you've got a phone, turn it off, put it on silent so it doesn't interrupt the program or those around you. We do have restrooms outside the door if you kind of snake your way out. They're just outside the door. There's restrooms there. There's also a drinking fountain. I want to go ahead and welcome our next presenter. This is Kristen Drozdowski, and she is going to delight and amaze us with information about Riso. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you, Amanda. I also thank you to the entire library for creating events like this that bring people together. I think that in times that we are in, having spaces like this is really important, and so it's extremely delightful to be here, and I'm very grateful to have been invited to enchant us about the Riso. So the reason I named this talk Riso for the Curious is that I can't help notice that a lot of people are curious about Riso because it's not really something that you just bump into on the everyday. It's kind of rare to come by. And the other reason is that there really aren't a lot of prerequisites to working with the Riso, but I would say that curiosity is definitely one of them, or maybe the only one. So I'm just gonna let you guys know a little bit about me and my background before I get started into how the Riso works, some history, and some other fun things. So I'm an artist and designer based in Ypsilanti, and that's where my studio is, that's where I teach workshops, and that's where my business is. In 2014, I started my business Worthwhile Paper, and it's basically a line of printed goods, like greeting cards and notebooks and guided journals and art prints. And we make everything ourselves locally, and it's really fun. And what I love the most about it is with this kind of line of products that I've designed, it offers me the opportunity to work with a lot of retailers. So we started doing wholesale early on in the business, and that has built up to having had worked with 2,500 different independent retailers so far, a little bit over that, and I just love this, forming relationships with other small businesses is really exciting to me, and it feels mutually supportive and fun. So that's kind of what I mostly do for my main work. And so experimenting with the Riso has been new to me in the last 3 to 4 years, but my longer term background is in screen printing. And I'm going to talk about kind of how that translated to Riso a little bit later in the presentation. For now, one of my favorite things about the Riso is as someone who just absolutely finds so much magic in color, like the image on the screen, I love seeing the transparent inks overlap onto each other and create new colors. That's something that's super characteristic about Riso. I'll go into inks a little bit in more detail also. My other favorite thing is that the Riso printing has such a potential to accommodate a vast variety of art styles. Really anything can be put into the Riso and output as a fun print. And so it's really my belief that any type of artist, or even if you don't consider yourself an artist, you can make something fun and amazing on the Risograph. This is just a few examples of some of my work. This is a recent little collection of greeting cards that I made on the Riso. I used a lot of pattern and grid, and more specifically the color overlapping. Super exciting to me to explore different opacities and different ways of making the colors interact with this. And something else that's really new that I've been working on now that I've gotten more and more experience with the Riso is creating zines. This is super fun, but a totally different type of labor of love because you have to figure out where to print on what page to collate them together to make the book work. And every time you put something in, each page has to be put in the front and the back and then additional colors. So it becomes this very more lengthy process, but the result is so satisfying once you staple it together and it's a booklet. So these are new. I have them downstairs at the Print Fest at my table. They were very fun to make. So this is what a Riso looks like. If you haven't seen one already, it basically looks like a copy machine, but what is that thing that I'm holding? The Riso magic is all on the inside of the machine because when the door is closed, it kind of just looks like your everyday copy machine. But really, it's like a printing press inside of a copy machine instead of like a toner-based regular Xerox that you would find at a place to make copies. So the thing that I'm holding is called the ink cylinder, and this is exactly what is being imprinted onto the sheet of paper. The strip of pink that you see there is a rice paper stencil that the image that you want to print gets burned onto that stencil, and then the ink cylinder rotates quickly every time a piece of paper goes through, and that's what imprints the image onto the page. I will definitely get more in detail, but I wanted to give you a visual first before trying to explain this for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, because just explaining it in words, you could be like, what are you talking about? So that's what it looks like. Oh, and I also want to share that each ink color needs its own cylinder. So the little black round by my left hand in that picture, that comes out, that's an ink tube, and that's what you can replace. But the larger element that I'm holding is a pretty hefty machine part, and that you have to commit a color to. When you put the ink tube in, it circulates through the drum, and basically that is my coral ink drum now. In order to switch out a color, you have to go through a whole process of either just printing all the remaining color out, it takes thousands of copies, or taking the whole thing apart with a tiny screwdriver, scary, and putting a new ink in. So it's a commitment. They're the most expensive element of the machine. The new ones are running like $900 right now, which is hefty, so it's an investment. So I don't have every ink color that I would personally like, but that is, I do love the coral, I will say. So what is a risograph? By now you've gathered that it's a stencil-based printing method, very similar to screen printing, but in a completely different shape and way of being made. So this means an image is created in a stencil and the ink gets pushed through the stencil. And the inks are super colorful, vibrant, very characteristic of modern day Riso is we see the fluorescent inks, really bright, poppy, punchy textured colors. And they're made from soy oil is like the carrier for the pigment in the ink. So they're quite eco-friendly. And it prints one layer at a time. So if you want to create a 2-color print on the machine that I have, which only runs one color at a time, you have to then print one color, take the stack, put it back in the paper input, and then print the second color on top after it dries a little bit. And so really the signature characteristics of the way that the print comes out, if you've ever seen, I'm sure many of you have seen a Riso print, they're that grainy, poppy, textured, really unique look, and it's charming and romanticized. And it's really easy to fall in love with a Riso print because it's very specific and special. There's some other characteristics about the machine that might not be as exciting because they can be a little problematic depending on your attitude, which is they don't always register correctly. Sometimes the paper will shift in the machine a little bit, and for us perfectionists, like a designer like me, that might drive someone crazy at first. But over time, you learn to just accept that this is really part of the aesthetic. It's part of the charm, is that slightly misregistered, kind of fun about it. And there are some things on the machine where you can tweak the print to go in a direction or two, but you know, it's not 100% within your control at all times. So when I teach my workshops, I like to tell people that it's really less about achieving a premeditated desired outcome and more about experimenting, creating something, seeing what goes in and then seeing what comes out and just seeing it, you know? And so if we kind of, it's a fun way of releasing expectations to what the outcome is, and more really just about having fun with it. I mentioned the eco-friendly aspect about the inks being soy-based, but I also want to mention that the Riso printer doesn't use a whole lot of energy. The amount of heat that it takes to burn the stencil is super minimal, so it really doesn't use a lot of electricity. And there's also movements there's a solar Riso project where people are hooking up solar panels to Riso because they don't need like tons of power, and therefore you have just a completely solar powered machine. I would really love to try that, but my Riso is already plugged into my studio, and so if I ever wanted to take it on the road or something, which sounds also a little scary, I might try to see how that works out. But I just wanted to mention that it is really one of the most eco-friendly printing methods. There's no water used, there's not a ton of heat generated, there's not a ton of electricity, and the materials used are fairly eco-friendly, including the soy inks, the rice paper stencil. That's the waste product of the machine, because once the stencil is made, it's then like squashed and pushed to another place in the machine, and it's just this small like compostable little end product at the end. Also, as I mentioned before, the Riso is super approachable. A complete beginner can use it. You don't have to be a accomplished artist or super serious designer in order to make something awesome on the Riso. So it's a great printing method for beginners and just anybody. Before I continue on like the actual step-by-step process from going from artwork to print, I wanted to kind of backpedal a little bit into some Riso history, because I think it's kind of a quirky, unique thing to know about how we went from where Riso started to what we are all using today as artists. So this process really, although the Risograph didn't really come onto the scene until the 1980s, the root of this company started in the 1940s in Japan, post-World War II. And at the time, the founder of Riso, before he was the founder of Riso, his name is Noboru Hayama, was drafted into the Japanese army, and promptly after that, the war ended. So he was like, what am I going to do now? This is what I was going to do. And around that time, even though the war was ending, there was a lot of need for information to be put out there, and in a cheap, inexpensive, easy to replicate way. And so the mimeograph was being used widely in Japan at that time. And for those who aren't familiar with the mimeograph, it's pretty similar to screen printing. In this image here, it's a depiction of one that was being used at the time, where it kind of looks like a screen printing screen, except it's a wax paper that was carved, a stencil was carved into it with like a stylus. And then ink was rolled onto the stencil and then pressed onto the paper, and then you lift it up and you have a print. So at this time, the ink was a pain in the butt to import. Apparently it was, there were a lot of import regulations that made it hard to get good ink, and it wasn't even ideal for the environment that was very humid in that location. So the Hayama, actually his first project was just to set out to make a good ink that they could make in Japan. And that was the beginning of the Riso company. And then, of course, like how all technology evolves, it's like, well, then how, okay, we fixed this. We have our own black ink now. But how do we make the masters? This is the stencils. How do we make those more efficient? Okay, we made the stenciling more efficient, but how could we make the printing more efficient? And so between the 40s and the 1980s became more mechanized, more engineering, just this kind of complete growth in printing technology that turned the Riso company from just an ink supplier to a full-on industrial machine manufacturing printers. And that's pretty cool. And what I just really kind of want to put a little point in is that I love that this thing that we're using right now to make beautiful, fun prints that make us happy started with a war ending. I just think that's kind of lovely to know. And so, but how did we get to where we are today? By the 1980s, it was still just black ink in the Riso. And we're talking about, oh, the characteristics of Riso are these beautiful, brightly colored inks and the fluorescent pink and all of that. Well, along with the Riso, other printing methods for institutions and businesses and home printers were also being produced. So we're talking home printers and Xerox copy machines and things that ended up being a little more cheaper, a little easier to get. And so those kind of came onto the scene and the market for the Risograph shrinked. But at the same time, artists were, finding that the Riso produces these super unique and fun, with this vintage charm, products or the prints that come out. And so Riso actually embraced that, and that's when they started making colored ink, like, okay, the fluorescence, the metallics, the fun stuff. So that's really where it started and where it is today. So it went from being more of an institutional printing tool for schools and churches and businesses to being really like primarily an artist-driven medium. So I want to talk a little more about how it works in case you are still curious about how to go from an art piece that you make or something that you design to it finally coming out of the machine. This is another view of the Riso of me putting an ink drum in. And so there's 3 steps. The first step is to prepare your original. This really can be anything. If it can be scanned or if it can be manipulated on the computer, at least for my machine, it's viable as a original piece to give to the Riso to create a stencil. And so not all machines have the digital version of inputting artwork. Some of them, especially the older models, only have the analog scanner. There's still so much you can do with that. What I really love to do myself is use different colors of grayscale paper and make shapes out of the paper, and then those create value in the machine or in the stencil. Because Riso will pick up, it basically reads in grayscale. So if you scan something in color, it's only going to read it in grayscale, and it's only going to print it in the ink color that's inside of the machine. So this is where it becomes also pretty similar to screen printing, if you're familiar, how we're dealing with a black and white negative first, and then it comes out in whatever ink that you're putting on the screen. So that can be set up. My machine has the capability of routing a cord to the computer where I can design things, set up the layers, do color separations, send that to the Riso, each layer to the different colors. And then all of them have the analog. So there's some techniques involved for both of those options. The analog just requires a lot of experimenting because it's really hard for the mind to see the color red and know what is that going to read like grayscale. Like you really have to train your brain to see value over color to understand maybe how dark something is going to be. And if you can't, that's okay. You just put it in and print it, and then now you know that color red turned into this level of darkness. It's a little bit more predictable if you have experience with Photoshop or a design program on the computer, because you can set your exact opacities and have a little bit more control in how it comes out. And really just trial and error on all of those fronts is the way to go. It's just sometimes it's just hard to know until you print something out. So the second step is making your master. Once you're satisfied with your original, the master is the stencil. And so this is the piece of rice paper that automatically wraps around the Riso drum. A stencil gets burned into it, and then with heat, and then it gets printed. And so that happens either when you push a delicious plastic button on the machine or you push print on your computer. I prefer the plastic button because it's more fun, but can be done both of those ways. And the third step is to print lots of copies. The thing about the Riso that has made it so ideal, which is actually what Riso means in Japanese. The word Riso actually means ideal. And so what makes Riso ideal, both for artists and self-publishers and for the original use of just like shucking out tons of information material, is that it can just print super, super fast. It's like ka-chunk, 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 and it just shoots out prints. So you can make a lot of copies, but you also don't have to, because it's just up to you however many copies you want to make. The master can only be used once, so it's probably smart to at least print like 50 of something, because you've already made the master. You might as well slide some more sheets of paper in, right? Because otherwise you have to, if the next master is made, the one that's on the drum gets scrunched up and you can't reuse it. So that's kind of, and making the master uses up a lot more ink than just printing, because it kind of like floods the whole stencil with ink. So that's just there to consider. But all in all, a roll of masters is like $30, and it's not like this huge expense. So if you mess one up, it's fine. It's not like, it's not stressful. It's not the end of the world. So now that you know a little bit about how the Riso works, I wanted to kind of illustrate just a little bit about my journey and what I'm doing with the Riso now, how it came to be for me. Like I said, I have a pretty long background in screen printing. I got my first print design job in high school, which is really rare, and I was working for a small business. And it felt super unique. And then I started screen printing in college a lot. That landed me a job at a screen printing studio. And then I started making my own screen printed stuff with the help of my husband, who is a screen printer. And he screen prints all my stuff now because they have amazing equipment at VG Kids. That's the print shop in Ypsi. But when I have always been interested in Riso, but like I had not seen one ever and didn't know how it worked. I thought it only printed in fluorescent pink. I had all these kind of ideas about it that I wasn't sure about. And then several years ago, I took a workshop at Room Project by another Riso artist and designer, Rachel Delmott. She's actually here downstairs. So you should definitely check out her work. She was teaching workshops. And that just demystified the whole thing for me. And I realized there were a lot more ink colors. It was so similar to screen printing. My brain just completely like, oh, I totally know how this works. Even though it's so different. It's like similar that it's a stencil printing method, but different in its characteristics. So that really drew me in. It was, during the pandemic or slightly before, I think it was a little bit before the pandemic, and got me really curious about Riso. And so I just had to get my own. And so the similarities I've pretty much talked about already, which are that it's a stencil, it's one ink color at a time. But the main difference is that Riso reads value. So with screen printing, you can kind of create the illusion of value by using halftones and textures. But Riso will read a photograph that you scan in and will print a photograph. So it has the level of detail to go from, 100% black to all of the various grays. So it'll read texture and value in ways that screen printing, I don't think, can really achieve. And another thing is that the inks are transparent, like I mentioned. That's new to me with Riso instead of screen printing. And also the way that just like the speed, the setup is quicker, and I can like design and print something in a day, which feels really fun to me. One other aspect I love is how easy it is to bring community together around Riso. So I've been having workshops at my studio. It's such a fun way to have people in a room doing something creative and sharing with each other, meeting friends, making stuff, seeing what other people make. It's truly amazing. Another thing I think is that Riso feels very empowering to me, especially having one, but also it's inexpensive. If you can access one, it's fairly easy to get to know and to use, and it just feels like there aren't as many hoops to jump through in order to self-publish something, and that feels empowering to me. Where if anybody from any place can figure out a way to make a project on the Riso. And I think that it's not like you have to have a fancy book deal with a publisher to make some really cool book or zine. And so there are people making some really amazing projects with the Riso. It feels empowering to me because I have one in my own studio and I can print something myself instead of relying on any other thing. It's the only printing method that I have in my own space, and that has just felt extremely fun to me. And then also to be able to share that with other people, since they're rare and hard to come by. So this is a print I made on the Riso, just kind of illustrating that point. I love to support other artists. And so I want to talk a little bit more about my workshops that I offer and what people learn there and how that has kind of brought things together in a different way at my studio space. So what I really love is teaching beginner-friendly Riso workshops. And whether you are a seasoned designer and artist or someone who wouldn't consider themselves an artist at all, or a writer or anything, you can come to a Riso workshop. They also offer them here at the library. And I think they're free here, of course, so that's super fun. In my workshops, I keep the class size pretty small so that everybody can work on a project together and go through start to finish, being present during the printing method and having some control over their results. And then we all get to share at the end and trade prints. So that has been amazing, and just like seeing all the different things that people make and the questions that people have, and just watching or facilitating the experience for learning something new is extremely fun. What I really like to do is come up with a theme for each workshop, and that kind of takes the anxiety away of coming into a space and being told, okay, make something, and it's kind of overwhelming. So I've done zine making workshops at the studio. I've done collage, so just completely focusing on collage, and this is, I think, one of the most approachable forms of exploring the Riso printmaking, because anybody can cut shapes and collage. It's a really accessible art making method. And so having tons of magazines out and different paper colors, lots of different art supplies, various shades of gray, markers and paper and textures and all sorts of things. And then people will bring their own art supplies too and share and trade. And so that's super exciting. And the other aspect is just like it's social and collaborative, and I think we're all still recovering from this like isolation for so many months and years of the pandemic, where just getting together with other beings and sharing and having a good time together is like really so enriching. So I really, really love offering these, and I just listed one. If you're interested in taking one, I have one coming up on Saturday, December 6th. So that's up on my website, worthwhilepaper.com, if you are interested in that, and it's in Ypsi. So I wanted to share a little bit of results from a recent Riso workshop. There's also a few people in the audience that have been to a workshop, and I just love to see you here. So this is fun. The background image here is an example. This was the collage night that I did. So people used photographs and cut out shapes and then layered vellum on top and drew with a black marker, and we printed 2 color layers and black. We're able to do this because there's only 8, we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were only 5 students in this workshop. So it was like, okay, we're going to print an extra color. We're going to get like really into this. And that's what I love about the small class size, because it's less overwhelming for you, and it's also, there's like the potential for what we can make is higher in 3 hours. So that's very fun. Happy faces here. And so I just want to emphasize that Riso is perfect for both like serious seasoned designers who want to make like a serious project, and like indie creators who are just doing this for fun. Large scale printing for a business or a mission or some kind of purpose or cause, but also just like if you want to have a little fun and DIY self-publish something just, as a gift or for fun for yourself. And like I said, artists and people who say I'm not an artist. So everybody, I think, is ideal for creating something on the Riso, and I think that means anyone here and beyond. So something that I am offering now that I have several years under my belt of trial and error and working with the Riso and teaching a slew of workshops is my dream is to work one-on-one with people in a way that empowers them to be a part of the process. So rather like a print-on-demand thing where you give me a file and I print it and then you come and pick it up, you get to meet with me. We work on how to translate your project into Riso. You have creative control over, as much as you can with what your output is going to be like, and then you get to be present for the printing process. So it's really exciting because as an artist myself, I love being a part of all of the process and seeing how it's happening and being there. So I love working one-on-one with people, and I started offering this a few months ago, and so I've worked with 4 or 5 people to make a project, a few zines, some art prints, and it's just been really lovely. So feel free to reach out if you ever want to bring a project to life on the Riso, or take a workshop if it's more you kind of want to dip your toes in. And so I just love the being involved in the process and collaborating. And that just sounds really fun because you can't just bump into a Riso everywhere. And so the fact that I have one, it feels like a responsibility, but also very exciting for me to share it with others. So I'm calling this Not So Secret offering Inner Circle Press because I'm not really like putting it on the internet or advertising it in any way. It's more like if we've made a connection via a workshop, or you're my friend, or you're anybody in this room, or beyond, or somehow stumble upon the website, it would be fun to work together. And keeping it super local, not on Instagram. I'm not on social media anyway. So I kind of just love this era of taking it all the way back to word of mouth, organic relationships, hyper local, small batch, genuine, sincere. Like that's what I want to see in the world. And so you know about it now. So I wanted to leave time for questions. We have 10 minutes. If anybody has any question at all, or magical thoughts, or anything you want to share, Amanda has a microphone, and she can come around. Just raise your hand.
Hello. Thank
Hello.
you. I'm curious, what size paper can you feed through the Riso?
Yes, this varies per the machine. My machine will not take anything larger than 11 by 17. And the max print area on mine is actually just 8.5 by 11. So it'll fit a full 8.5 by 11, but it can't go beyond that. So there are a lot of other machines that can print larger and go all the way to the 11 by 17, but mine's the small one, and it only prints one color at a time. There's also Riso printers out there that do 2 drums at the same time, which sort of eliminates the registration concern for at least 2 colors.
For everyone curious, the libraries has 2.
There you go.
I work here.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, too expensive for me. Thanks for your question. Scheme away.
The same question, but with paper weight. How heavy can the machine go?
Oh, yes, great question. I love this because there's so many things I could have, like little details I could have said, but these questions are perfect. So the Riso will only print on uncoated paper, first of all, and the paper weight, mine will not take anything thicker than 100 pound. Anything thicker than that will just like kind of cause a paper jam and not really work so well. So not super thick paper, and then anything down to just like the thinnest. Thanks. Anyone else?
I was going to ask about like paper type, like, so they kind of covered some of that, but like, what about like thinner printmaking papers? Like, could you put kitty kata in there, or?
Possibly. If it's really, really thin, it just might get just a little, the fibers might get a little destroyed because it picks it up with like a rubber roller. But normally like super thin text weight paper would work. Anything with like irregular edges might be difficult, and I have not personally tried it.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Hi, I was just wondering, how does it not use water? Like, I can't picture that. You always have to wash forever the ink out of whatever thing, like your stencil or. So how
Right.
does it do that?
I think it's just the way that the ink is formulated. It just doesn't require any water. Sometimes you have to clean the drums, but I've had my machine for over 3 years and I have not had to clean anything yet. And some people will, since it's oil-based, you wouldn't use water, you would use like mineral spirits or maybe something a little more less toxic. I have a little bottle of something called EcoSolve. It's a like turpentine alternative for oil paints. And I've used that to clean off the roller because sometimes, I don't know if you've heard of roller marks on Riso, is where if it picks up some ink when it goes in for the next color, then that ink gets deposited on the roller that picks it up, and then like we'll leave these little lines on the paper. But yeah, it's interesting, right? Like you don't have to wash it out or spray it out. That's the other big difference with screen printing, is the hefty cleanup is just not required.
Yeah, or so many artworks like oil painting or anything.
Yeah. Thank you.
How do the layers work?
Oh, great question.
Like, does it print one color down and then you have to wait until all that color is gone and then print like what's remaining for a different color onto in another layer?
Yes. So, for example, the picture that we see up here, I printed like the pink rectangle first with my pink ink drum. And so there was just 100 prints or 50 prints of just the pink rectangles. And then I would take that stack once it dries for a couple of days back into the Riso. But then I would put my yellow ink drum in. And then I printed the kind of archway shape. And that printed on top of the pink rectangles. So then at a certain point, I just had a print that was pink rectangles and yellow doorway shapes. And then for the third and final color, I put that stack back into the Riso, put my blue ink drum in, and then it printed the skinny blue rectangles on top of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Great question.
Hi, I just have a question. So is the ink being put down in dots? And if so, is there any control over the size and placement of them and stuff like that?
Yeah,
Dot
excellent
pitch. question.
It is. If you look really close up, it is teeny tiny dots. And the Riso just has this signature texture called grain touch. And so that's why it's all grainy, but it's kind of like staticky and irregular, right? As opposed to halftone that would be more gridded, like what you would see in like a comic or something like that. Is there any control over the size? That would be something you would have to set up yourself in a design program. So I would say there's no way to change that on the machine itself. It would be something that you would create in your artwork. There is a halftone option on and there's like coarse and fine. So like do what you will with that material. It's kind of like you gotta just see what it looks like. I've never used it because I just love the grainy, irregular kind of perfect texture that already happens.
So does it only use transparent ink, or do you have to get opacity by just layering inks?
Yes, the vast majority of the inks are transparent, with the exception of a few. I know that cornflower blue has some white in it, so it's more opaque. And the metallic inks, those will show up on darker papers. But if you're gonna put a darker paper in, it's gonna be kind of like using, markers on a darker paper. Like they're not gonna pop out they're not like a paint marker would. Like I'm talking the Crayola like markers. That's kind of what I compare it to. To get the inks darker, you would just increase the opacity to 100. And so like 100%, I think in this image here, for example, I have the pink set to 75 opacity, the yellow set to 75 opacity, and the blue set to 35. Because the blue is just really dark, and I had to tone it down to 35 in order to match the same as the pink and the yellow. So like the trial and error there. But yeah, that's a great question. It would be really cool if there were some more opaque Riso inks.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for the synopsis and the whole process of the Riso machine. Obviously, you want to create a bigger community of artists, and I'm just curious, have you started to see through these workshops and indie collaborations, have you started to see a growing community, or what kind of community of art do you want to foster in the area here?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I feel like organic growth that's really rooted in real life relationship is my biggest interest. So I have noticed that, after every Riso workshop that I teach, I've just made a list of emails. And so when I initially started the idea of helping artists print their work on my Riso, I just sent an email to that short list of people. And so that's just like, these are connections I've personally made in person. And that's my favorite thing. And so friends, word of mouth, organic in-person relationships, that's what really lights me up. And so I'm kind of just putting that out there and seeing how it grows from there, if that makes sense.
Can I have a follow-up?
Yes.
Any like pie in the sky big dreams from this sort of humble start?
I don't know. I love it. Do you have a suggestion?
I'll think on it too.
Yeah, let me know.
All right, I think that's a good natural endpoint. I want to, for us to give a hand to Kristen, and thank you for that wonderful talk. Thank you so much. For those of you who knew what Risograph was before, you learned even more. And if you didn't, welcome to the wonderful and curious world of Riso. I want to remind folks that we do have our vendor fair happening downstairs in the lobby until 5 o'clock. Get your purchases in. We have some hands-on things and some demos happening in the lower level worth checking out. That is open till 4. And then we have 2 exhibits set up in the library today. We have an exhibit on the 3rd floor, and then we also have an exhibit in the basement that are also both worth checking out. Also pop by Kristen's table and other Risograph artists downstairs, and so you can see what the different variety and skill level and type and color that folks make with the same kind of medium. So thank you again for coming out to the library for Print Fest.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you. Have a great day. And thank you, Kristen.
Thank you so much. Oh, thank you.